hello to emotional health. But parents, everybody, we need it. We need this conversation. And I honestly believe we need it more maybe than any of the other conversations we're having. And that sounds so crazy. I mean, there's so many things that we need. I mean, this world's so crazy. There's so many crazy things going on. I mean, there's so much truth that needs to be known. But I know for my life, I know as a pastor, as a leader, digging in and helping people disciple one another and walking with people, walking with leaders as they do that, the need is getting down to this emotional health level.
Our children are leaving the faith in droves.
As a result.
Oh, I got to pause here.
We're going live right now.
How can we raise our kids to stand firm, have a faith that lasts, and navigate such a time as
We're
this?
hearing reports that our nation's capital has just been...
To turn a nation, you have to take the next generation.
Today in the news, COVID-19 numbers.
I'm Jake McCandless, and this is my podcast, Stand Firm Parents. We're working together to help our children have a faith that lasts.
And now, here's Jake McCandless.
And it's another episode of Stand Firm Parents. So my daughters coined a phrase in our family. They say, hey, don't make it weird. I think one of them started saying that to the other one, and that's just stuck. So often you hear that. You hear it in the backseat of the car quite often on drives. Hey, stop making it weird. I feel like I made it weird. We're talking about parenting. We're talking about marriage. We're talking about safety with phones. We're talking about faith that lasts and all these things. And then I had to bring in emotions, mental health. I had to make it weird for us, right? I had to get vulnerable. I think you can tell this is more than a series. This has been my journey. It's actually been my journey in the past year and a half or so. And of course, it's impacted my whole family. As though me and my wife have been talking about when we show up and it's going to be a Bible study where you talk, or I'm being interviewed, or whatever it may be for something. It's like, okay, here we go. We're going to bring the vulnerability. It's interesting when we launched the church plant that we have in Northwest Arkansas, the network of connection groups called Epic Life, where we're really focused on training people to be missionaries in their context, whether that's their neighborhood, their workplace, wherever that may be. And then we hope those relationships that are built in those contexts then build to a Discovery Bible study, a connection group. And in that connection group, we're walking through scriptures together, but we're also sharing life together. And so early on, we had some people come in and work with us on being vulnerable. And so we joke now, that was 4 years ago. And I think in ministry, we always thought we were transparent and felt we were. But that vulnerability has stuck. We laugh at our group because we are very vulnerable. There's very little that gets held back in those groups, which I think is the way it needs to be. So, I'm sorry. I made it weird with this series, Hello to Emotional Health. But parents, everybody, we need it. We need this conversation. And I honestly believe we need it more maybe than any of the other conversations we're having. And that sounds so crazy. I mean, there's so many things that we need. I mean, this world's so crazy. There's so many crazy things going on. I mean, there's so much truth that needs to be known. But I know for my life, I know as a pastor, as a leader, digging in and helping people disciple one another and walking with people, walking with leaders as they do that, the need is getting down to this emotional health level. So, okay, made it weird. We started with talking with my therapist, and then we had this incredible conversation with Dr. Mark Dance, like, should a Christian even talk about this? Which we got into medications. I didn't plan to just to get total vulnerable there. But I feel like when we started talking about emotional health, we went like Star Wars. We went to the far edges of the galaxy in the emotional health, mental health realm. We started with therapy, counseling, medication. Now that's not like far out there. Maybe there's a poor example, the outer rim of the galaxy aspect. But that is a further level when emotional health is something we deal with on a daily basis. And so in this episode, beyond making it weird, I wanted to get to those just basic, everyday emotional health aspect. Can we do that? Can we do that together? Would you do that with me? Now, I don't feel wrong for starting on the outer rims and dealing with therapy, counseling, and medication. Because I mean, this whole thing, emotional health, mental health, that there's such a stigmatism with that. It's such a taboo topic. And then I think oftentimes someone's dealing with maybe a trauma for the past, or maybe you don't even know, dealing with something, depression, anxiety, whatever that may be. And we're just told, pray more, read your Bible, take every thought captive, don't be anxious, whatever that may be. And it can be deeper, and we need help. But I love the comparison I think both of our guests have made so far. They both have compared emotional health with the physical health, more in the idea of getting help, right? If you break your arm, you're going to go get a professional help with that, right? For most stuff. But I think you can think in terms of also physical health. There are levels of that, right? Depending on how severe it is or what it is, depends on the amount of help you're going to get. But you do not go to the doctor for everything, right? And then there's aspects of our physical health that we just learn, right? You learn very early on, you don't touch a boiling pot of water. You don't stick your hand in the fire, right? The list can go on of things you don't do. We're not really taught many things regarding emotional health. And the things we are taught, often in the teaching of that, comes shame. And with that shame, it just compounds the emotional struggle with that. So let's think about emotional health, mental health in terms of the daily battle for the mind. As I said, the daily battle of the mind, you may have had like a quote from a sermon, maybe a sermon title, maybe a book title, maybe a phrase from a lesson, a sermon, a Bible study or something pop in your mind, which is interesting because I just have said, and I've said throughout this series, we don't really talk about emotional health, mental health much in Christian circles and at church. But yet, when we say something about the battle of the mind, we're like, wait a minute. Okay, I've heard that sermon. I've heard that talk. I've heard that conversation. And I can go back to at least youth group, at least, starting 7th grade, if not before that, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, in those Bible studies, elementary Bible studies, church camp, youth group. Man, early on, hearing something about if you're going to give God everything, you need to give him your thought life as well, especially in the boys groups, and then later the men's groups, the promise keepers and things like that, right? You got to make sure you're watching your thought life, which always would go back to lust, sexual desire, something like that, right? And then there'd be the mentioning of passages like 2 Corinthians 10, take every thought captive, Romans 12, do not conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Proverbs 4, guard your heart. From that, everything flows. Those type things, and we talk about guard your thoughts, protect your thoughts, be careful of your thought life. And so it'd be terms of, I guess, women, girls, did y'all have those type of conversations? I know there's a lot of them in the guy groups. Probably there still is. Another place that I would hear talked about guard your thoughts, be careful of your thinking, would be when we're talking about the armor of God passage, right in Ephesians, and you're talking about doubt. Put on the helmet of salvation for those doubts about your salvation, and talking about assurance. And I'd love to see a hand raised or just say, hey, that was me, if you've been in a Bible study with something like that. Maybe you can, but I cannot think of anything that went further. I remember a Bible study that my wife led that was impactful in our church. It was went through a book like Lies Women Believe or something like that. No, I don't remember what those lies were. I guess there were things like comparing yourself and those type things, which would get in a little bit of maybe the thought life stuff, but really getting into the core of our daily battle. I'm not saying what I've mentioned so far is not a regular or daily type battle, but I think there's a more depth that we leave out. So I've told my introduction to emotional health probably in every episode, but me and my wife, we earned a trip in this business thing we were in to go to this emotional intelligence conference in Florida. So the Florida thing sounded great. The beach sounded great. Date trip with my wife sounded great. So I went to the conference, and it was really the most grueling I've been to tons of conferences, church growth, Bible conferences, preaching conferences, all of these things. And here I am learning about relationships and emotions and all this stuff, and real masculine trip. And one of the speakers was talking about anger. He said something, I don't remember the exact words, but something to the effect of, hey, when you get angry, feel angry, you don't have to lash out. and be mad. It sounds so stupid now, but I was like, wait a minute. Of course you do. Of course you got to be mad. And that was my introduction to, okay, one's an emotion, one's something you feel that's just going to happen. You can't control it. That's just going to happen. Maybe sometimes that's good that it happens. Most of the time it's not, but it's just going to happen. But then your behavior follows, and you can work in the in-between there and do something different. And there's a lot of in-between every day, right? Now, my wife had been introduced to this sooner. And so my wife's a school teacher, and this is probably, 8 to 10 years ago from now. She was going through a training. If you've been around those in education, or if you're in education yourself, whatever, so many years, there's a different kind of training you go through. You get that figured out, and then they change it, and you're going through something else. But it's called conscious discipline. And it's really, I think, pretty incredible type way of thinking towards discipline and behavior management, classroom management. And so the idea is, hey, behavior's communication. What's the emotion? What's going on behind it? I think that's what it is. But ultimately, what it was beginning with was, as a teacher, you have to realize your emotions, and you have to regulate yourself when there is a behavior issue in the classroom before you can begin to then deal with the behavior. And my wife got really good at that. She can be in complete chaos in the classroom, like complete chaos, and keep her cool and do what is needed to move forward. It amazes me. This was before she learned conscious discipline, but when she just got done student teaching, she was doing like a long-term sub before she got her official job. And I had to go get a key from her one day. And I guess back then they just let me like walk in the classroom. So I'm walking the classroom. She's like, carpet time. I think it was like kindergarten. And I go, and she gets up from carpet time, leaves me like in the carpet with all the kids around me, walks to the desk, the big teacher desk, to get the key. In the amount of time she does that, it's like 10 feet or whatever. Kid comes to me, and he's like blowing his nose. He's got boogers all over his nose. Another kid loses a tooth. Another one's crying about something. Just in the 10 feet she walked to go to the desk, I'm like, man, there's no way I could do this. But she, through that training and just her ability, got really good at just not being bothered by whatever would happen, and eventually was able to work in alternative learning for elementary age students and deal with some wild behaviors and keep them safe and teach. And really incredible. She's really incredible what she does. Couldn't do it at all. But she would teach me a little bit or tell me what she was doing along the way. But I share those stories because they were my gateway into everyday emotional health. Every day we feel feelings, we feel emotions. Often that just like we feel it, we do it. We feel it, we react, we say, we speak, we react upon it. But it doesn't have to be that way. So getting healthy emotionally is to recognize the feelings. Oh, it kills my masculinity to use the word feeling. It's necessary for us to be stand-firm parents, for our children to have a faith that lasts, so I must soldier on. But for us to recognize the feelings, for us to train ourselves to intervene and not react. Just this morning, getting ready to go. So studio days are a bit hectic because I travel out of town to the studio, record all day, come back, and we've got ball games tonight. Both girls got softball games, and I'm trying to make it back, and my wife's got to move them around everywhere, and so she's heading to teach. The girls are trying to go to school, and the girls are just going crazy this morning. Can't get the clothes they want, all this stuff, and my wife's standing in the hallway. The girls are just fussing, and she's just like, turns to me, and she's just like, I'm just trying to stay calm so I can make sure they have a good day. But she was doing this stuff, right? Like, she could have got angry because they were frustrated, but she's telling me, hey, they're not our enemies. They're just having a bad day like we have sometimes. And I'm like, man, I gotta get on the road and get out of this, or I'm not gonna be on it. But we have stuff coming at us all the time. And just in the world we live in, there's so much bad news. It just seems like as you scroll all the time, just so much, and it's such a challenge. Okay, so then that's just one element of talking about how we deal with emotional health and mental health all day. That's kind of the real time, but it's a factor. And it's a chain of events, right? Because something happens. What tends to happen, right, is you've had a bad day. Things have built up at work. You come home. Something is said. You may perceive it right or wrong, then you react, which leads to reaction, which gets worse, and then it trickles down to everything, right? Chain of events, which all flows out of those feelings, those emotions. And so learning to, man, I'll tell you, we'll have to pause there. That'll be part 1. We'll pick up part 2. We'll pause there. I know I was just getting worked up. It's starting to get good, but we'll keep making it weird in part 2 next week. Check it out. You've been listening to Stand Firm Parents. Stand Firm Parents is a production of Stand Firm Ministries in partnership with LifeWord Studios, created by Jake McCandless and Brandon Harrington of Dime Collective. Again, thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe, share, and most importantly, stand firm.